Hello and welcome to episode 6 of creating a farm advisory bot using the Claude API. So, in the last episode, what we saw was when you ask something that is very explicitly about crop disease, the AI seems to now understand because we made a classifying agent that basically says what kind of question it is: off topic, a greeting, farm strategy, or crop disease. And that was what we did here. So we had a simple agent that did everything, and therefore we got wrong or confused replies. And then we added these 4 valid categories, but then we still had crop disease and farm strategy be answered by the same agent. Now, if you ask about things like irrigation, fertilizer, pest management, hold the crop, or what can I do about the weather, those are all farm strategy questions which are higher level. They may be handled by an agronomist who has experience managing multiple farm sites. Whereas the crop disease is something that you take a magnifying glass, you look at a particular plant and you look at the symptoms and then you answer like a doctor answers after looking at something on your body. So we want to separate this into something like this. We will have a regular triage agent, but now the crop disease and the farm strategy will have their own agents. And we do this by making 2 separate prompts. And so let's first look at what happened in the last time, which is my cotton has brown spots, and it answers correctly are the brown spots on the leaves, stems, or balls. And then if I ask something like, what's a new policy on the minimum prices? And we have gracefully added the response of, I can only help with farming questions, and that's a canned response. It doesn't spend any tokens. It does spend the minimum tokens to classify using Haiku. And then when you ask like a strategy question, when should I start harvesting my groundnut this season? It begins to ask how many days have passed since you planted the groundnut, because it might still want to answer according to the how the crop looks. And then when I say 30 days, it falls back to I can only help with farming questions about onion, cotton, and groundnut. What crop problem can I help you with? Which means it loses the idea, because if you remember, we had our JSON with diagnosis, immediate actions, and treatments, and this doesn't really fall into anything, so it doesn't know what to do. So now what we're going to do is we are going to add these helper functions in our code, and we are going to essentially have the same classifier and return the category. Now, our fallback is still crop disease. That is something we'll solve later. But now our system prompt, which was the old prompt with that kind of JSON structure, we are now adding a new prompt saying you are a farm advisor specializing in seasonal and operational stuff. And now it also has something like storage decisions, irrigation scheduling, fertilizer timing, crop rotation, and storage decisions. So now it can really answer those kind of questions. And we have 2 helper functions, handle crop disease and then handle farm strategy, which become our 2 different agents. So there we have our split strategy where we add some nuance, we add super specialization within the agronomy so that the low level and the high level questions can be answered for the farmer really well. So let's go ahead and test this out. All right, so we've pushed this, and now we are going to ask something. How long should I wait to harvest my groundnut? And I guess let's see what the response is. It does come with storage and stuff like that. And there we have it. So since your leaves are still green, you likely have another 4 to 6 weeks to go, maybe less depending on how fast they start to turn. Keep an eye on the leaves. And now this might have come from the 30-day like help, and it may understand that 4 to 6 weeks is a lot longer than 30 days. And it talks about soil, it talks about keeping an eye on things. And then let me throw kind of a commercial question, which is, should I wait for prices to go up in the Mahua market? Now, this should become an off topic, but let's see if it understands that context. There it is. So it's going to politely tell the farmer that I'm not going to talk about commercial questions. That's, in fact, a little dangerous thing to do, to advise a farmer about when they would sell. So let's go back to something like strategy and say what kind of irrigation is best for groundnut in this region. And this should not be politely declined. This should be a question that gets answered, and there it is. So groundnut doesn't need too much water. It actually prefers drier soil. Too much water, and the pods rot in the ground. It also goes into other detail about whether you're in a dry cell or a wet cell, and basically what the rest of the farmers might be doing on average, and a good watering strategy. And then a follow-up question with when did you plant your groundnut? And I've had decent rainfall since then. So I could continue this conversation. And if I kept it to farm strategy, if I kept it something like irrigation, fertilizers, or pest management, it could work out. So let's try one last question before we wrap up here. I planted 30 days ago, and the rainfall has been average. I would also like to understand how to fertilize. If I have, say, drip irrigation. So I'm just throwing in something that I didn't throw before, which is I'm going to say that I have drip irrigation, right? And I think this is still within farm strategy, right? It's not a commercial question. It's not a crop disease question. It is something that is farm strategy. And there we have it. 30 days, plants are young, average rainfall, you're okay. For fertilizer with drip irrigation, you can do it smartly. It doesn't need heavy feeding. And then the timeline of how we are doing the drip irrigation. And it understands that the nitrogen and potassium can be given in liquid form, and the potassium becomes important and so on. So it is doing a very good job understanding that this is a farm strategy question. So there we have it. We have successfully added two separate functions that make two separate calls depending on the nuance of the question. But in the next episode, we're going to see something that this still doesn't do, which is they don't talk to each other. The farm agronomist who looks at every crop and their symptoms on each plant should be talking to the agronomist who looks at multiple farms. One probably reports to the other, or they talk in tandem every day, and the diseases and the symptoms of one plant or a section of the crop will affect the farm strategy and vice versa. So in the next episode, we're going to look at how to enable architecture in which agents can talk to each other. So see you in the next one, and thank you so much.